1775. On the other side of the Atlantic, the most powerful empire on Earth was about to face a rebellion it never saw coming. 13 small colonies, scattered along the eastern coast of North America, had grown tired of paying taxes to a king who gave them no voice in return. Britain had the largest navy in the world, a professional army, and centuries of military experience. The colonies had farmers, merchants, and a handful of untrained militias. On paper, it wasn't even a fair fight. And yet, what happened next would give birth to a brand new nation and reshape the entire world. This is the story of the American Revolutionary War. Before we go any further, hit that subscribe button, smash the like, and follow along so you never miss the next chapter of this series. And I want to know, where in the world are you watching this from right now? Drop your country down in the comments. I read every single one. Long before the first shot was fired, tension had been building for over a decade. Britain had just fought an expensive war and needed money, so they turned to their American colonies for it. Taxing paper, tea, glass, and nearly everything else, all without giving the colonists any actual representation in Parliament. The phrase, "no taxation without representation," spread like wildfire through town squares and taverns. In 1770, tensions exploded in Boston when British soldiers opened fire on a crowd of colonists, killing 5 people in what became known as the Boston Massacre. Then in 1773, a group of furious colonists disguised themselves and dumped an entire shipment of British tea into Boston Harbor, a defiant act that would later be remembered as the Boston Tea Party. Britain responded with brutal punishment, shutting down Boston's port and stripping away colonial self-governance entirely. Instead of crushing the rebellion, it only pushed the colonies closer together. On April 19, 1775, British troops marched toward Lexington and Concord to seize colonial weapons and arrest rebel leaders. Waiting for them were local militiamen, ordinary farmers and tradesmen who had grabbed their muskets the moment word arrived. Nobody knows for certain who fired first, but that single shot ignited a war that would last 8 brutal years. By the end of that day, British forces had suffered heavy losses, retreating back to Boston, chased and fired upon nearly the entire way. Just 2 months later, colonial forces faced the British again at Bunker Hill. Technically, the British won the hill, but at a horrifying cost. Over 1,000 casualties against a much smaller colonial force. It sent a clear message to the empire. These colonists were not going to fold easily. In the middle of all this chaos, colonial leaders gathered and formed the Continental Congress, placing a Virginian named George Washington in command of a brand new Continental Army. He inherited a force with almost no training, no uniforms, and barely any supplies, tasked with somehow defeating the greatest military power on the planet. If you're enjoying this story so far, do me a favor and hit that like button, then subscribe if you haven't already. It genuinely helps this channel keep making content like this. And drop your country in the comments below. I love seeing how far this story travels. On July 4, 1776, the Continental Congress formally declared independence from Britain, unveiling the Declaration of Independence, largely written by Thomas Jefferson. It was a bold, almost reckless move. There was no turning back now. Rebellion against the crown was treason, punishable by death. But that same year, Washington's army nearly collapsed. British forces crushed the Continental Army in New York, forcing a desperate retreat across New Jersey. Morale hit rock bottom. Soldiers were deserting in droves, and many believed the revolution was already finished before it truly began. Then, on Christmas night in 1776, Washington made a legendary gamble. He led his exhausted troops across the icy Delaware River in the dead of winter, and launched a surprise attack on Hessian forces at Trenton. The victory was small in scale but massive in impact, breathing new life into a dying cause and proving the Continental Army could still fight and win. The following year brought the single most important battle of the entire war. At Saratoga, American forces surrounded and defeated a major British army, forcing an entire enemy force to surrender. This victory did something incredible. It convinced France that the colonies actually had a real chance of winning. France, still bitter from its own losses to Britain in earlier wars, agreed to formally support the American cause, sending money, weapons, soldiers, and most critically, its powerful navy. That winter, Washington's army camped at Valley Forge, and it became one of the darkest chapters of the entire war. Freezing temperatures, disease, and severe shortages of food and clothing killed thousands of soldiers without a single battle being fought. Yet somehow, the army that emerged from Valley Forge in the spring was stronger, better trained, and more disciplined than ever before, thanks largely to a Prussian officer named Baron von Steuben, who drilled them into a genuine fighting force. If this story has you hooked, make sure to like this video and subscribe. It really does help this channel keep growing. And don't forget to comment your country below. I love watching this community expand from every corner of the world. With France now involved, the war expanded far beyond just the northern colonies. Spain and the Netherlands eventually joined against Britain as well, turning a colonial rebellion into a full-blown global conflict. British forces shifted their focus to the southern colonies, capturing major cities like Savannah and Charleston, believing loyalist support there would help them crush the rebellion once and for all. Instead, brutal guerrilla warfare and unexpected American victories, like the one at Cowpens, slowly wore down British strength in the South. General Cornwallis, commanding British forces, eventually marched his army into Virginia and settled at a small coastal town called Yorktown, expecting naval support from the British fleet to resupply and evacuate if needed. That support never came. Instead, the French Navy arrived first, blockading the coastline and cutting Cornwallis off completely from any escape by sea. Washington, along with French allied forces, marched south and surrounded Yorktown by land. Trapped, outnumbered, and with no way out, Cornwallis was forced to surrender his entire army in October of 1781. When news reached London, the British Prime Minister reportedly said it felt like the world had turned upside down. Britain's will to continue fighting collapsed almost entirely after Yorktown, even though scattered fighting would continue for 2 more years. In 1783, Britain and the newly formed United States signed the Treaty of Paris, formally ending the war and officially recognizing American independence. Britain gave up all claims to the 13 colonies, and for the first time in history, a new nation had been born through revolution against one of the most powerful empires the world had ever seen. The American Revolutionary War proved something the world had never truly witnessed before: that ordinary citizens, farmers, tradesmen, and everyday people could rise up against a global superpower and win. It planted the seeds for democratic revolutions across the world, inspiring uprisings in France and beyond, and it created a nation whose influence would go on to shape global politics for centuries to come. That's the complete story of 1775, the year 13 colonies dared to defy an empire and change the world forever. If you made it this far, you clearly love history as much as I do. So do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, smash the like, and follow this channel so you never miss the next episode. And please comment down below and tell me exactly which country you're watching from tonight. I read every single one, and I'll see you in the next episode.